Our bad router. Bad router. We can have that on display.
Live from Dogleg Brewery in Fort Worth, Texas, it's time for You Can't Brew That on Television. Now here are your hosts, the Reverend Ryan Bono and Brewmeister Kyle. Hey guys.
What's going on, Rich? We're just beating the bejesus out of some digitalware.
Yeah.
Still not working.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Caveman techniques, they're gone.
We put the frontier in Frontier Television.
You indeed put the frontier.
Or tier.
As in, all of our electronics are from the 1800s.
Can we put the frontal?
Yeah, we can put the
Frontier
frontal in Frontier.
I think that we can.
Just not on this show.
Just, yeah, maybe some other time. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dogleg Studios. I am the Reverend Ryan Bono. Beside me is Kyle Lapointe. We're here, as we are every Tuesday, trying to help you bridge the gap between beer snob and frat boy. Kyle, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. We spent about the last hour and a half troubleshooting technical problems, fix one, break another, and we've moved our studios into a whole nother room of our house today.
Completely new temporary location.
Yes.
We're just bouncing. We're very nomadic here at Dogleg Studios.
We are now directly plugged into our interweb.
Next week
Which we assume is good.
Next week we fully expect to be broadcasting from a real, actual brewing closet.
Mm-hmm.
So
We figure, if we can't do it from in near, then we could maybe broadcast next to the pellicle in there.
yeah, that would be good. We could have our visual aids right there with us. That would be nice.
We have a beer growing, and I say growing because it was a it was a saison that we made. We let sit, do this thing, let it have a little air, and then we tossed a bunch of raspberries on top of it, unclean. So it started to do what it was going to do, and we think it's a little pediococcus from what the experts we've talked to.
It's some kind of coccus.
Which is, yes, it's some sort of a pedio. And we have that, it's a lactobacillus type variation. And we're thinking that it should be an interesting beer. We've got a big old layer of stuff that looked like leaves for a while. Now it looks like brains. It's amazing.
We're getting very scientific on everyone tonight. We've got an interesting show for everyone. We're going to start with a tasting of a local beer, Real Ale, Full Moon Pale Rye. This is a fairly highly rated deal. People seem to enjoy this one.
It's a good beer. I've had it before. Like I said, it's just a light, not quite super hoppy pale ale. I'm looking forward to it.
Also on tap for tonight, we have the first ever You Can't Brew That homebrew tasting. And tonight's homebrew comes to us from High Point, North Carolina. The place where this was brewed actually got hammered by a tornado Sunday. So it's not around, and I'm not really sure if the brewer's watching tonight. But
So my question on that is, I've heard everybody survived by going into the basement, and that's a good thing. Dogs and family and everybody's okay.
Dogs and birds.
The snakes and aeroplanes.
Yes.
And Lenny Bruce.
Yeah.
They were all
afraid.
good. Right. None of them were scared. So we heard they all survived in the basement. And I also know a lot of them quasi-Yankees, North Carolina. We'll give them the Yankee title for today. But anyway,
grew up in Chicago.
they have the basement, right? And that's where a lot of people brew. So I'm wondering, is all the brew equipment in the basement?
No.
Is everything okay?
No. Something far more foul lives in the basement there. So anyway, after that, we've got a few little bits of local news to share with everyone tonight. Nothing too major. And then we've got another. You want to start with that? I'm sorry?
It's up to you.
Yeah, let's start with
Let's
it.
open a beer.
And then after that,
You guys drink your real ale out there. Let us know what you're thinking.
We're going to talk about the different styles of mashing that homebrewers have at their disposal. And Matt's beer, I'm going to go with overcarbonated.
Overcarbonated.
That's my first impression.
Yeah, just going to let you know that.
Oh, wow. That has a really neat aroma. There's something sweet in there. It's not like a malty sweetness. That could be the wood aging.
Yeah, it's a little bit of piney, a little bit of the earthy hops. I'm getting mostly hops in there.
There's some Cascade hop for sure.
I'm thinking more. I'm smelling more like noble type hops where you get the spicy and earthy type flavors from them. But that's an overcarb.
I don't know, man. All I'm getting is the wood aging. This smells like a really neat beer.
Maybe that's what I'm mistaking.
This comes from my cousins in North Carolina, and those guys brew some really interesting stuff. This is a cardamom beer aged in sandalwood, and these guys are always putting together neat stuff like this. So I'm really looking forward to giving this a try. It looks like you've already dug into it.
I haven't tried it yet. I can't get past the giant layer of foam. So they would call this in a homebrew competition just below a gusher. Because a gusher would be a bottle that never stops blowing out the top when you open it. But it's not quite a gusher. It's a high level of carbonation. You would much rather do this in a competition than
absolutely.
You would the opposite.
I always prefer to overcarbonate rather than undercarbonate. That's interesting.
What does cardamom taste like?
We put cardamom in the winter coat.
No, we didn't.
Didn't we?
I don't know.
It's like a Middle Eastern spice.
It's a herb. Yeah, I get like an intense spicy.
Yeah, the spice is definitely there.
Yeah.
I was mistaking it for the wood aging at first, but that's definitely the spice.
No, I don't get much on the wood aging other than there's a slight bit of lactic in the back, but not cloyingly lactic. Lactic, you're going to get a little sour flavor from it.
Yeah, and it's there, but it's not overpowering, and so I would imagine it's something that they were actually shooting for.
Yeah. No, and it's good in a lot of styles. Lactic is not necessarily a bad thing.
This beer is definitely not awful, so we're going to have to reserve the Matt soundbite on that one.
Ooh.
So...
you can go ahead and play it, Rich.
Yeah, go ahead and play it. What do we think of this beer, Rich? Oh, God, that is awful.
Nice,
there it is. Thank you, Matt, for your wonderful input. Now, while Kyle is getting the full moon ready, I want to go ahead and have Rich fire out tonight's trivia question.
Ooh, trivia question. I'm ready. It's my turn.
All
What do we got, Rich?
Trivia coming up. Tonight's trivia question, I thought this was a cool one. When Prohibition was lifted, 2 breweries delivered wagons of beer to the White House. What were those 2 breweries?
Which, by the way, I thought was interesting because that means they actually brewed the beer while the Prohibition ban was on.
Yeah.
And they didn't seem to make any bones about it.
Yeah, I had heard about this before. I'm going to try to stall a little bit while I try to think of the breweries. But I knew that there was definitely beer that they made to the point of...
Answer?
There was beer that was made
Googling.
to the point of... where it had to have been fermenting and aging and doing all that stuff for months before Prohibition was done. So it makes you wonder just how much these brewers knew about what was going on.
How much you don't know.
Yeah, and that's the other thing.
The amazing amount of talking you're doing.
So the first one I'm going to go with would be an Anheuser-Busch because they were one of the original beer cart people that actually delivered it all over the place.
That is correct. Not exactly a brain buster on that one. The second one you should know, but you might guess incorrectly.
And with the next one, I'm going to have to go with Pabst.
You know, that is one of the ones I would have guessed too.
Oh, God, that is awful.
No, that certainly is awful. That was an awful guess. Because the second cart of beer came from America's oldest brewery.
Yuengling!
And now you might be onto something, and you are, and it's
Yuengling. Yeah.
See, it's
good beer from Yuengling.
Very good beer from Yuengling.
That's one of those interesting things, you know. I mean, the Prohibition, they kind of switched gears and survived by, instead of turning grain into alcohol, churning grain into other things. And it's kind of what caused our country to become quite fixated on breads and cereals and different things like that when done incorrectly, when not malted, are actually not very good for you.
Right.
So, you know, the whole malting process is something that is an amazing part of beer. If you don't malt a beer, if you don't actually have the grains start to turn into another plant, basically they're sprouting. If you don't do that, you can't get the sugars out of it. And that's what maltsters do when they make it. They make the They make the malt, the grain into malt. So
I think we're going to cover the tail end of turning grain into malt here in a little bit towards the end of the show. But first, we want to bring you a little bit of news from RAR. Tomorrow at Thistle Hill in Fort Worth, and Thistle Hill, by the way, for those of you who don't live here, is an historic home here down in the Fort Worth area that gets rented out for parties and receptions and things of that nature. And I guess RAR is taking it over tonight, and they're offering free samples of their brown ale. This is a very good beer. RAR only brings this one out once in a while. Then this Thistle Hill is haunted. Nice. I was unaware of that. We're gonna have to look into this more for next week. And Saturday at the McKinney Tavern.
This tastes like I'm drinking the nectar of a flower. That cardamom really comes out.
Yeah, the cardamom is really kicking.
Like I'm pretty damn sure I know what cardamom tastes like, and I didn't before this.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like
the cardamom and
the flavor's there.
Once
and the base beer is very pleasant. So.
Once you taste it, you know that that's what you were smelling too.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
The cardamom. That's why we were all different directions tonight, because I don't think either of us had ever smelled a cardamom beer before.
Right.
Have you guys cracked the real ale yet, or are you still talking about the...
We definitely did crack the real ale, and I've had a few of those, a few sips of these.
Which one were you talking about just now? I got lost.
The real ale, it's very nice. I mean, it is a very pleasant, very light beer, but you can taste the fact that they use rye in it, and rye is one of those flavors that's going to be very similar to the cardamom type of a gambit. You're going to get some spiciness from it, and some people don't necessarily like that, or at least don't like it the first couple times they've had it. I know that was me. When I had rye beer the first couple times, I said, ooh, there's just something I don't like in it. And then I figured out, oh, that's what it's supposed to taste like. You know, it wasn't something that's wrong, because, I mean, it's almost like it's got a little bit of a spice from maybe like a pepper or something in there. It really is spicy.
And it absolutely is an acquired taste. But once you acquire a taste for rye beers, they really are interesting. And they add something really neat to the palate and the aroma, really, of just about any beer.
I would even call it peppery as opposed to spicy.
Absolutely, yeah.
Peppery. You know, because I wouldn't call it like having a...
This isn't like eating a loaf of rye bread. It's going to impart something different in beer than it does in bread.
Right, and it's not like eating a jalapeno type spicy. That's pronounced correctly, like you...
Jalapeno?
Jalapeno, right?
Jalapeno? Right, that's how they say it down on the border. Jalapeno.
On a steak. So Faz in chat says that he prefers the coffee porter, that real mix.
They do make a good coffee porter if you can ever get that casked.
Oh. Knowing that Faz is watching, by the way, Faz, I did want to bring up the real ride tonight, and I couldn't get a hold of you today, so why don't you toss in on the chat and let us know when the real ride is coming up.
Yeah, Faz is one of our...
Faz is a bicycler.
Yeah, one of our fellow cyclers.
He likes to wear the skin-tight yellow jersey and the little shorts and stuff and get out there and piss everybody off in traffic.
Yeah, and he's actually pretty good at it. He did the Real Ale ride last year, and I think you did 60 miles, something like that, right, Faz? And that's a pretty cool ride, and from looking at the... you can go to Map My Ride, which is like Map My Run and other places like that. And Map My Ride, he said what now? He quite often does. He's got the Arrogant Bastard jersey. I like that one. That fits quite well.
Well, it's a little tight.
Right, but
he is arrogant.
Right, there we go. So, yeah, the Real Ale, this beer right here is very light. It's on the lighter side of a pale ale.
It is. It goes down very smooth. It's a very smooth drink.
And it's not. It basically, you get a little bit of hop bitterness. You get a little hop flavor. It kind of washes away into some maltness, and then you get the spiciness and the bitterness at the same time. You get the rye and you get the bitterness of the hops.
The rye and the hops definitely kick you at the same time.
It's really
towards
neat.
The back of the palate.
And it's a very refreshing beer. You can drink that one fast and often.
Yeah.
So
I could get a little carried away on that and not even realize it. So we wanted to talk to everybody tonight about mashing. There's several different methods of mashing, two primary methods, and the second method really has two variations that we wanted to discuss. And the first one is probably the one that the home brewers at home are using overwhelmingly in their beers, and that is just single infusion. So what's going to happen in a single infusion mash is you're going to collect your grains, you're going to heat your water to the prescribed temperature.
Somewhere between 146 to probably 160.
Depending on whether or not you've primed your ton and depending on how many grains you're using. And
you want a light beer, a full-bodied beer?
Right. There's all sorts of things that can go into this, obviously. But you're going to heat up your mashing water, and then you're going to dough it in, and then it's just going to steep. And the temperature that you've heated your doughing water, your mashing water up to, is intended to react with the temperature that your grains are already sitting at, and bring them to what we're gonna.
You're trying to bring them to a certain temperature.
Sacrification.
Yeah,
the sacrification rest.
Yeah, you're trying to bring it to a point.
Forgetting how to pronounce that for a second.
There's a couple of different types of enzymes. There's alpha and beta amylase, and you're trying to get them both to be reacting, depending on the beer. You're trying to get them both to be reacting, or just one of them to be reacting. It's actually generally the higher temperature that you mash at, the less the sugars will be converted, because of the way that the types of enzymes work. Basically, you got, long story short, you do the chain theory. You've got one type of the enzymes that choose the chain from the end, and so it takes a bite off of the chain each time and lets a little bit of the molecules, let some of the hydrocarbons go, and then there's one that cuts it in the middle. So that that's the alpha and the beta. And when you have something like that, seriously, you got a big giant fuzzy on your face.
I was saving that.
Oh. Well, we have you got the alpha and the beta, and they're doing that. Well, when they're both working in conjunction, or when you're allowing it to break, when you allow the alpha to break it into smaller chains and you allow the beta to chew the smaller chains, you can get a very, very high efficiency on your grains, but you're not going to have a whole lot of sugar content left. So the lower you mash at, generally, the lower the body of the beer, the more sugars that are going to come out, the more alcohol you're going to get from the grains that you're putting in.
But the ultimate goal here is you've started with well-modified barley, well-modified grains.
Modified being what we were talking about earlier. Malting
is what modification boils down to.
Yeah.
And you're trying to convert those starches into sugar, so that the sugar can then be turned by the yeast into alcohol.
Because yeast can only chew on like a few sugars, right? Like maltose and glucose and maybe one or two others.
Yeah, there's only a handful of them. So you're trying to make that conversion. And really, in all mashing, that is the ultimate goal. But in single infusion, you've started with grains that are already well modified. So really, the only step necessary is to convert those starches into sugars.
I hate to interrupt, but I feel like if I walk outside, that bees would be trying to collect pollen off of me.
I'm guessing you're still going after
it's a good beer, but, like I said.
I already finished mine. It was great.
Yeah. Well, there's more.
There's some more. I'm going to finish Matt's beer. So the second and third styles are kind of similar in the way they're applied, but there are some differences. So what we're going to talk to you about is step infusion and decoction. So, Kyle, why don't you tell us a little bit about what step infusion involves?
A step mash, basically like what we were talking about earlier. You have alpha and you have beta, and simplifying into those phrases is much easier. So you got your alpha, you got your beta, and your alpha will kick in at low temperatures. And I believe, I don't have these offhand, I didn't study very well, but I believe it's about 122 degrees or 124
your
degrees.
Your alphas are kicking in 100, you know what, I just completely lost it. Up to about 145 degrees where your alphas are kicking in. Okay. And that is also where your betas start to kick in. From 145 to 159, your alphas and your betas are working together.
Yeah, but your betas are working more.
A little bit.
Generally with a step mash, what you're trying to do is I think it's about 128 degrees when betas start coming in, and it's about 152 degrees when betas are done, when alphas are done. So there's that range in the middle. So when you're step mashing, what you're trying to do is give it a low temperature rest, somewhere between about like maybe 110 degrees and 124 degrees, and let the alpha really do its job. and then you raise that temperature one way or another to about maybe 135, 140 degrees, and that's where it's kind of in the middle where alpha and beta are both going. And then the next step, you take it up to 150, 158, somewhere in that range, and get the final step, which lets the beta kick in.
And you're also getting a protein rest there at those lower temperatures. And what a protein rest is going to give you is that's going to give you a little bit of clarity, some more clarity in your beer, and it's also going to help with some head retention.
And the clarity comes from the fact that you're breaking up those sugars. I mean, you're breaking those long chains into medium and then small, and you're letting the beta come in and clean it up.
And when you do a step mash, you're creating a lot of yeast nutrient. A lot of nutrients get created during that protein rest at the lower temperatures, and then you're also really increasing the efficiency of your mash. I remember that when we went from primarily doing step infusion to doing single infusion, our efficiency really took a hit.
Yeah, big time.
But it's the single infusion. It's easier. The step isn't quite as necessary when you're using well modified malts. But we did take
necessary is an interesting choice of terms, because I mean you get what you want out of it.
Right.
You can get some different characters out of the beer, and you can get a more clear and a more, I guess, base beer. You don't have as many of the complex sugars left over, and you can let your specialty grains really come in and do their thing.
So in a step infusion, what you're going to do is you're going to start with your base mash, and you're going to bring that to your protein rest temperature. And you're going to let that steep for the required amount of time. What is it, typically 20 to 30 minutes for your protein rest?
Yeah, somewhere between 15 and 30
somewhere
minutes.
in that neighborhood.
Depending on.
And then you're going to boil additional water. And the formulas for how much water you need to add can be found pretty easily in any home brewing handbook or on the internet. But you're going to
1 to 1.5 quarts per pound.
There it is. So you're going to boil your additional water, and you're going to add the prescribed amount of additional water that will bring your mash temperature up to conversion temperature. And that's where, like we talked about earlier, your starches are getting converted into sugars.
Yeah, so basically at that point you're going to start, because you want to mash in, and if you've ever doughed in your mash where it's at a really, like maybe 0.9 or a 1 quart per pound, it can get to be a really thick mash. And that's the way you got to start it when you're doing a step mash, because you're going to add more boiling water. And you can run some calculations to figure out exactly how much boiling water you need to take that up to the next temperature. And you want to try to not end up above 2 quarts per pound.
And step mashing, actually both of these last two methods were primarily used back before thermometers were commonly used in home brewing. Back in the day, they couldn't say, okay, we're going to need this number of gallons at 170.1 degrees. They just boiled it. And once it got to boiling, that's when they dropped it in. That's how they did their measurements.
Yeah, they just knew they had a big pot, and they took a little pot out, and they boiled that, and they put the little pot back in. Then they took the little pot and picked it back up. They boiled that, and they put the little pot back in. And that was how they step mashed.
So the final method is called decoction.
Which is essentially what we just described.
It's very similar, only rather than boiling new water and putting it in, you're actually taking from the mash. You're taking out of the mash a certain percentage of your grains and or your water that's in there, and you're boiling that, and then adding that back into the mash to bring the entire temperature back up.
Right.
And decoction is a little bit more complex, but just like in most things, a little bit more difficult means you could have much nicer results.
You're not going to have nearly as consistent results with decoction
Absolutely
mash.
not.
Because depending on how much grain you pull out, or if you pull out grain at all,
how fast you boil it, how long
how
you
fast,
boil it.
yeah, how hard you hit the boil. Do you dump it into a pre-warmed pot? Do you dump it into a cold pot and then warm it? Because at that point, when you're doing a decoction mash, you actually have a higher amount of water in there. But it's still, sometimes it's hard to pull that full gallon that you need out of there. And that's why people pull the grains too, because you just can't get that much liquid out of it without running through your sparge process.
And decoction is a very traditional way of brewing beer. I mean, the decoction really of the three ways that you can mash, decoction is the one that's been going on for the longest.
And in some areas, like in Pilsen, which is where in the Czech Republic, where Pilsner Urquell, which pretty much started lagering, and started pilsners across the world, and now they're the most popular style in the world. But they had to do a decoction mash because it changes the pH of your mash, and they did not have the proper pH because their water had so few minerals in it that they couldn't get to the low enough pH. They couldn't get their pH acidic enough.
So they were using a temperature lower than even the protein rest. They were doing what's called an acid rest, and the acid rest occurs between 95 and 110 degrees.
Yeah.
And during the acid rest, that's when you get a lot of your pH lowering. So this is good if you're using soft water, like they were using, or if you're using a lot of pale malts. And last week we kind of touched on how traditional barley wines were made using only pale malt, and the flavor and the caramelization that you're getting in your average barley wine really comes from caramelization during the mash. This is where it's coming from.
Yeah,
is decoction.
Well, my favorite part about brewing is that there are some traditions and there are some interesting things that go along with it. But you know what? All of these things have changed over the years. And they came about, the reason why traditions were there were because of taxes, laws, necessity, fuel sources.
They didn't have the science back in the day.
They had what they had. If you had a Scottish beer back in the day, it was fueled by peat moss, because that's what they were burning.
And that's why the overwhelming majority of you that are brewing at home are using single infusion, is because you're going to the store and you're purchasing well-modified malts. You don't have to caramelize your malts in the boil or in the mash. You're getting them caramelized. So these are traditional methods, great methods that we're really excited actually about. We're going to be doing a barley wine here in a few weeks, and we're thinking about doing a full
We're going to do what some of the brewers do, which is to reuse our yeast cake. It's a pretty cool process. If you haven't done it before, go ahead and do it.
And we're definitely going to shoot some video and/or pictures of that for use on the show.
It's basically just take some planing. You do a small beer, and you let that small beer take all the yeast and ferment, and then you pull all of the small beer out, but then you do a big beer of a similar style. So we're going to do an English IPA, and on top of that English IPA, we're going to put a barley wine. So once that English IPA is done, it's all done, the yeast is settling down to the bottom, that yeast is still ready to go. You just take all but the last little bit, and you leave a little bit in there. You dump the fresh wort from the barley wine on top of it, and that yeast will be, boom, ready to go. So that's a good method when you have a high-gravity beer, so you don't have to make a yeast starter that's 5 gallons. So
Kyle, unless you have anything to add before we go to our traditional closing.
I'd like to add something.
Let's add something.
Last week, we didn't get to talk about how wrong you were.
No, because I wasn't wrong.
But
I have contacted real Scots and real Irishmen to find out what cream ale is in the United Kingdom.
And these people, they have credentials?
I'm working on it. Well, they're from the United Kingdom, which means that they have...
So they're English. So they have
lousy teeth.
Just like true Irishmen, you contact
somebody
from England to tell you about an Irish beer.
I contacted a Scot. We all hate the British. We're all the same.
Oh, you're good, man. And so we just wanted to talk about the cream ale situation, where Bono thinks that cream ales have to be nitrogenated
in the UK.
In the UK.
No, I'm not talking about
new stipulation.
I'm not. No. That was from day one. In the United Kingdom, they refer to nitrogenated beers as cream ale because of the thick, creamy head that the nitrogen creates.
They also say the word wanker.
They do say wanker, and they have lousy teeth, and they eat a lot of limes.
All right. So that being said,
that takes care of Kyle's unfinished business.
So. That's we totally did not even bring that up. The new broadcasts.
Oh yeah,
we we're going to end up changing our night, is what it's looking like right now. There's very little chance that we'll be able to continue broadcasting on Tuesday nights. Because
we just wouldn't get any viewers.
Right, we would have to do it at 3 in the afternoon, and I don't think I should be that drunk at work. So
I usually am.
Well, but
I'm just an engineer.
You're just an engineer.
If
you're an architect, you'd be drunk on formula.
Right. So we've been leaning towards Mondays, and there's this kind of we'd kind of like to know what everybody thinks about that. So everybody watching at home, shoot us an email, shoot us a text.
Put it on the chat right now.
Put it on the chat right now.
Our number 1, number 2 are Monday nights about 7 o'clock and Sunday nights from 6 to 7 o'clock, sometime like that. Our thoughts on that are we got our own family lives on the weekends, and so it would be nice to do it on a Sunday because we wouldn't have work to worry about before that.
But that also means that all of you don't have work to worry about, so you're all doing other stuff.
So, but Monday, we really don't have anything going on Monday.
Yeah,
it'd be pretty easy. It'd be a shift.
We'd like to be part of your routine. And Sundays, I don't know about everybody else, but my Sundays don't have a routine. So Monday night, you come home from work, you grab a bite to eat, you watch Kyle and Bono talk about beer, and we happen to end at 7:30 Central, which something else starts at 7:30 Central, and that would be Monday Night Football. So that would work perfectly. But just give us your thoughts if you would,
We'll have to work with the NASA TV block we've currently got scheduled on Monday nights. That's a real hot ticket. So
NASA's about to lose their funding, so we're not really.
Oh yeah, they can't afford.
That,
maybe we can get their used equipment.
Right now, they're investigating Toyota crashes.
I heard the same thing.
Isn't that awesome?
So next week's beer is going to be a beer called Lobotomy Bach. Do you know who the brewery is on that? I know it's a German Doppelbock. Lobotomy Bach, I'm pretty sure there's only one. And until then, we would like you to keep drinking good beer and always remember that we are not professionals.
So please try this at home.
Very nice.
Oh God, that is awful.
Oh God, that is awful. Thanks, Matt. That guy's awesome. All right, I guess we can load up the chat room now and join in with our viewers.
Rich, can we get what about movie lines? Can we broadcast movie lines, or is it would we have to pay for somebody for that? If we drink a really horrible beer, can we pull